Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of Out There, the show in which we discuss cryptids, folklore, and all things paranormal. Now, update on the cryptid hunting trip, first things first, it is still happening. The details for it will probably be worked out next week. We have the location for one place for certain, however, we might also go to Ellensburg, where my friend saw that headless deer. I'm going to put out a feeler for that, as I think that camping somewhere where a recent sighting occurred might give us better chances of finding something. However, Ape Canyon is also very historic in Bigfoot lore, so I don't know if I want to just gloss over it necessarily. We'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll figure it out. As for more life updates about what I've been up to, I've been going through the wonderful and not infuriating process of applying for jobs. I got 4 rejections, I think, the day after I sent all of them out. But I've got a strategy, though. For every 1 rejection, I apply to 2 more places. And whoever accepts me first gets my employment. So, your move, guys. I actually do need to figure out what to do, though, because I've got a job interview that is only scheduled for a day where I'm still in Spokane. This is back home. This job interview is back home. But they scheduled it next Wednesday. I'm still in Spokane at that point, so... And it won't let me change it to another day besides that. So I might have to either email them or just not show up, or I don't know yet. We'll see what happens. But that aside, despite my frustrations of getting ghosted, rejected, having to make 5 different accounts for job application websites, getting scheduled an interview that's at a day and time that won't work, but I can only do that day and time or else I'm probably not getting the job. I actually have had something to look forward to this week. So the new movie, Sinners, only thing that I knew about it prior to watching it was that it was resulting in all these interview videos that everyone kept saying are Shamik Moore's nightmare. If you don't know what that is or who I'm talking about, don't worry about it. It's just it's a chronically online meme. But I knew nothing about any of this movie until I saw some clips of it on TikTok. And I thought it looked interesting, especially since it was a vampire movie, and that's something that seems to be the beginning of a new trend in Hollywood. So I was excited to go watch it. So I went to go watch it last night, and by last night I mean the night prior to this episode being recorded, which it is. I finally have enough time to do that. It's currently 9:30 p.m. on April 24th of 2025, but anyways, I went to go watch it last night, and I've got to say, while there were some moments where I felt the length, I was still completely invested the entire time. I think it's a really solid movie, and I definitely recommend it. It's basically From Dusk Till Dawn set to blues music, and it almost seems to have a bit more depth than that movie. I'm not saying From Dusk Till Dawn is a bad movie or that it's shallow. It's just that the tones feel different. Now, I'm not going to give a lot of spoilers for this. There will be light spoilers. But I will say there are 2 pretty big numbers in this film, like musical numbers, that are just really good. It's 2 different styles of music for each number, but they both do some really cool and unique stuff. And just the music throughout this movie as a whole is really captivating. And again, there will be some light spoilers, but I'm going to avoid discussing heavy spoilers. One, because I don't know if I'm legally allowed to do that or not, since we're using an FCC signal. I can't even curse on air. So I don't know if I'm allowed to give movie spoilers in detail. And 2, I really think you should go watch it. It's a really good movie. I really, really enjoyed it, and I highly recommend it. So, with that in mind, I enjoyed it so much that I wanted to take tonight's episode to talk about vampires. We're going to get into the history of vampire folklore and literature. Before we do that, I wanted to discuss how the vampires in this movie work. There's going to be some spoilers, so cover your ears or turn off the show for like the next 5 to 8 minutes, I think. That's about how long this will take. Because we're going to have to talk about some specific plot points here. Once again, please go watch it. Highly recommend watching it. It's a great movie. So, the vampires in this movie have the following strengths and weaknesses from what I can tell. We're going to start off with weaknesses because they're pretty straightforward. It's standard vampire stuff. Silver, crosses, and garlic seems to harm them, as well as some supernatural charms and protections. We know that hoodoo protection spells work against them, but we never saw if crosses work against them as well in this film. The sun also kills them. They burst into flames in contact with it. Pretty standard stuff. But something this movie really plays into is that these vampires can't enter somewhere unless they're invited in. Now, this idea is played with a couple of times in the movie and results in some pretty scary but also pretty funny moments. They really do kind of play and mess with this concept. Now, for strengths, these guys have the ability to fly, or at least the leader does. We for sure see him fly. Everyone else kind of just runs. So they have that ability. They seem to either be invulnerable or possess some kind of very slow healing factor, as a few of the vampires in this movie take some pretty big hits that would kill a mortal human, but it only slows them down. They also seem to have heightened strength, speed, reflexes, etc. Another strength they have that's important is charisma. They're able to trick multiple people throughout this movie by deception. For the most part, these vampires look completely human and don't turn into animals or become super pale. The only way you can tell is to look at their eyes, which glow at night, or I guess in the dark, their teeth, which become pretty prominent fangs, and mouths because these guys start drooling pretty badly around their food. But these are things that can be controlled, and they usually don't activate them until they're just about to kill. God, I don't even know if I can say kill on the air or not. I hope this doesn't get me in trouble. They also seem to have some sort of hive mind, as a few of the vampires mention that they can share stories and memories. This is also shown when the Irish vampire manages to speak perfect Chinese after turning a Chinese man, as well as a town full of non-Irish people suddenly being able to perform a perfectly synced musical number to an Irish jig after their turn. Now, before looking at vampires in media, I want to look at vampires in different cultures, particularly the cultures that this movie represents. You can take your hands off your ears, by the way, or you can turn the volume up. I think at this point, the spoiler talk will be done for a little bit. Now, a huge theme of this movie is showing all of the cultures and diasporas that were combined in the American South to create the culture and what it is today. When these different groups came over here, they brought their stories, music, and traditions with them. With these themes being so prominent in the film, I want to take a look at the different cultures' represented views on vampirism. Now, the main villain of the film is an Irish vampire named Remick. I don't know if that counts as a light spoiler or a heavy spoiler, but I think the character names are pretty well known, and I think people know who the villain is, so I'm sorry if that was a huge spoiler for his name. Vampirism has its place in Irish folklore, primarily with... I don't speak Celtic very well, or at all, so I apologize if I butcher it. I'm going to try to... Okay, so it's spelled A-B-H-A-R-T-A-C-H. I looked it up, and I think it's pronounced like Avatartak? Avatartak? I think. Pretty sure. I apologize to any Irish individuals if I'm butchering your language. Anyways, Avatartak was an Irish king who was supposedly a wizard as well as a dwarf. And he was hated by his community. Known for his jealousy, he ended up dying while sneaking out of a window to catch his wife in the act of a suspected affair. His subjects found his corpse and buried it, only to be shocked to see him fully alive and well the next day. However, what was especially unnerving was the fact that Avatartak's reanimated corpse was walking around the town with a bowl demanding fresh blood from the subjects to consume. Terrified, the citizens asked a neighboring chieftain to help them with their current undead problem. Avatartak was killed, but he proceeded to return the very next day in perfect health to demand more blood. It was discovered that the only way to kill this creature was to drive a sword made from the wood of a yew tree through its heart, bury it covered in yew wood and thorns, and seal the grave with a large, hard-to-lift stone. They were successful, and his final resting place can still be visited today. Now, African folklore is especially touched upon in this movie, which makes sense, as at its core it's about the experiences of black people living in the South. Different African religions and folklore came over when the enslaved peoples were brought over here, and that ended up turning into things like voodoo and hoodoo and other religions of that nature. And it's not just religion also, too. A lot of things that we associate with black culture today, like hairstyles, clothing, and music, all of those things evolved from stuff that their ancestors brought over. But we're going to be talking about folklore specifically here, even though the movie kind of touches on all of those aspects. So we're going to start actually in Africa with the Obayifo. They're described in West African folklore as creatures who can inhabit the body of any man or woman. They are described as having shifty eyes and an obsession with food. While hunting, they either emit light from their armpits and anus, or transform into a ball of light, depending which people you speak to. The Sasabonsum are creatures native to Ghana as well as Cote d'Ivoire, Togo, as well as Jamaica, where the tales were brought there by enslaved Akan people. They reside in forests, devouring people who enter into their territory. They are described as having iron teeth, pink skin, long red hair, large bloodshot eyes, long legs, and iron hooks for feet. The Sukoyant, also known as the Olhag, Asima, or the Hag, is a creature known to a few groups, including Guyana, Jamaica, Asima, the Bahamas, Barbados, Louisiana, and some other Caribbean nations. They're described as elderly individuals who remove their wrinkled skin at night and travel across the sky in the form of a fireball. They enter into their prey's homes through keyholes and cracks and suck their blood while they sleep. To kill one, you first need to distract it by placing rice around its house, in which it will begin frantically collecting the individual grains one by one. Then, you need to cover the container it places its skin in with salt. The Adze is a creature from the folklore of Togo and Ghana that can transform into a firefly, as well as a human. It has the power to possess humans and feeds on their blood while they sleep. Interestingly, there is some firefly imagery in Sinners. However, I think that it's more of a southern thing than a Adze thing. Adze. Also, I assumed that the fireflies in that movie were there to kind of play with the audience because they look like eyes glowing in the dark in the background. I just thought that was an interesting connection, though. Now, during colonial rule in Africa, the white Europeans occupying the various countries were rumored to be Wazimamoto, or blood drinkers. This rumor was also applied to the South Asian and Arabs that aided in the occupation of Africa. Now, the film also has some Chinese characters in it, which makes sense as that was one of the primary ethnic groups that migrated into the United States to help build the railroads during the Industrial Revolution. With this in mind, I looked into some Chinese vampire lore and found this. Jiangshi are like a combination of zombies and vampires. They can be created through a variety of means, spiritual or ritualistically. Essentially, if a soul is not properly able to rest peacefully, Jiangshi is created. Sinners kind of discusses this, with Annie mentioning that vampires are cursed to never know true freedom or the ability to rest. They are described as attacking with a brute force and clumsy violence, and the only thing that separates them from a zombie is that they have the ability to fly. They can be deterred using mirrors, which will cause them to panic at the sight of their reflections. Any weapon made from the wood of a peach tree, a rooster call, jujube seeds nailed to their acupuncture points, fire, vinegar. Most melee weapons are apparently good at deterring them in general. The blood of a black dog, dropping a bag of coins, which will result in the Jiangshi stopping to count every individual one. It's kind of like the Sukoyant with rice. Native Americans are present in this film, in particular members of the Choctaw tribe. They're presented as vampire hunters, which made me curious if native folklore had anything about vampirism before the arrival of European settlers. And I found a few things. Now, for this first one, I wanted to give it its own episode. I'm just going to briefly mention it for now. I'm going to be talking about the Windenope, and I'm not saying the full word out loud because it is late at night. I am not messing around with that. I am not invoking anything right now. I don't play with that kind of stuff when it comes to that's the one thing I don't play around with. It's the one cryptid, you know it. The word I just said sounds kind of similar to it. I don't want to say the word out loud right now because it's not okay. And I know this particular subject is taboo and has kind of become a little gentrified recently. So I'm just gonna say this: if you want to draw one of those, please think more vampire instead of a zombie were-deer thing, because a Wendanope is a human who has committed cannibalism, which results in their hearts turning to ice. They are forced to roam the wilderness in search of human flesh. And once again, it's humans who have only had their hearts frozen. Nowhere does it mention any kind of deer creatures or zombie deer, were-deer, any kind of deer imagery. You're thinking of a Leshy or some kind of Witcher 3 monster when you make these. Those are Slavic European creatures that is not an indigenous, or I guess Native Americans creatures, okay? They're more akin to vampires than anything else. By the way, this is not me calling out Wendigoon. He knows his stuff, he knows the lore. His profile picture is cool, I'm pretty sure it was made by a friend. This is no shade to him. This is just about art in general. This is not in particular about him. Because I get it, it's a popular image. And again, Wendigoon seems to know what he's talking about, and he seems like a credible guy. So this isn't shade directed at him. Anyways, the Haida people, Haida or Haida, once again, apologies for any mispronunciations, who live along the Pacific Northwest, tell stories of mosquito men, a tribe of man-eating monsters transformed into mosquitoes. Pretty self-explanatory: mosquitoes suck blood, vampires suck blood, best of both worlds. Post-settler arrival, vampires lived on in legend. In New Orleans, vampire folklore is enriched deep within the city. Jacques Saint-Germain was a French aristocrat who arrived in Orleans in 1902 and proceeded to bask in the nightlife. However, one night a woman was heard screaming from his house. The woman jumped from the second-story window and began telling anyone who would listen to her in her proximity that Saint-Germain had bitten her on the neck. Police found bloodstains and wine bottles full of blood scattered across his home, solidifying his status as a horrifying urban legend. Anne Rice's vampire series also took place in New Orleans, resulting in the two subjects becoming intertwined. Now, we can't talk about vampires without talking about the most famous vampire. Even Sinners isn't free from having some connections to the infamous story. Bram Stoker was born on November 8, 1842 in Dublin, Ireland. After beginning a career as a novelist and a playwright, Stoker began working on his seventh book, a horror novel titled Dracula. Folklore vampires, including the ones we discussed earlier, along with more well-known literature vampires like Carmilla, had existed and were pretty fleshed out. Certain rules like using wooden stakes, garlic, and silver were brought on by Stoker. However, he also invented some new concepts and restrictions, including a vampire only being able to enter somewhere he is invited, sleep on Earth from his homeland, and lack a reflection in the mirror. I guess there could be female vampire. There are female vampires in Dracula too, but I'm mainly referring to Count Dracula himself when I say he. Now, in the film, we see some elements Stoker himself has implemented on vampire lore, primarily the whole invitation rule. We see that in Sinners multiple times. Something else to note is that Stoker and Remick share the same homeland. Another figure of note that this movie seems to borrow heavily from is Robert Johnson. Now, Johnson isn't a vampire, but he's a huge piece of Southern folklore and kind of an urban legend. Well, I wouldn't even say kind of, he is an urban legend. Johnson was an African-American man who resided on a plantation in Mississippi. His only dream in life was to become a great blues musician. One day, he took his guitar to a crossroad where he encountered the devil himself. Johnson then reportedly sold his soul to the devil in exchange for unparalleled blues guitar skills. When it comes to the movie and the story, I can't help but notice a lot of similarities. Sammy, the main character of the movie, is also from a plantation in Mississippi. He also happens to be a great blues guitar player. Furthermore, his father warns him that playing blues music would attract evil, and since he's a preacher, makes sure to specifically emphasize that that evil is the devil. In the film, his father warns him, "You dance with the devil long enough, he'll follow you home one day." Or something along those lines. But it's basically that. And to an extent, his father is right. It's Sammy's playing that ends up attracting the vampires to the location. But Sammy and Robert are not one-to-one parallels. In fact, I'd even go so far as to say that Sammy is the opposite of Johnson. It's a deconstruction of the story in a way. Because Sammy attracts the devil through music, however, he is given a choice. Remick wants Sammy for purposes that I'm not going to reveal for the sake of spoilers, but he does specifically want him and his talents for a reason. And that's the thing. Remick is the devil in this. Why? Because he's a tempter, and that's what the devil is. See, the devil in the Bible never really goes out of his way to just kill for the sake of killing, or cackle maniacally as things burn behind him. He's a tempter. He tries to trick you, deceive you, stray you from the path of God subtly, and that's what Remick is in this movie. He promises people better lives through joining him in vampirism. However, in the end, it'll result you straying from the path of living out your life naturally and ever seeing a sunrise again. Remick isn't maniacally evil, he's calculating. Throughout the film, he preys on people's sympathies to get them to do things for him. He offers freedom and eternal happiness at a cost he conveniently forgets to mention all the downsides of. Sammy is put in a situation where he is face to face with the tempter and rejects him. Cover your ears for like 15 seconds again, because there's going to be some pretty significant symbolism I need to discuss. He rejects him with his guitar by smashing it into Remick's face. The thing that Robert Johnson supposedly handed over to the devil is what Sammy uses to rebuke him. Okay, spoilers are over. Now, vampires seem to be making something of a cultural comeback. Nosferatu recently showed us a side of vampires that I think has been severely underrepresented in media. And that is that they are gross animals. They suck blood. They are literally undead human mosquitoes. They should not be sparkly or sexy. Now, this movie does have Haley Steinfeld and Michael B. Jordan as vampires, which kind of negates the latter point I just made. But they are still pretty nasty in this movie. Even in the Castlevania anime, which I think is kind of where this vampire thing might have started from, or at least the sparks of it started from. Even in that anime, every vampire, except maybe Alucard, but he's half human, so whatever. But the others all have this kind of nasty edge to them that makes them just unlikable. Well, okay, maybe Lenore also, but I think she's more of an exception. That's kind of the whole point of her character, is she's an exception. Spoilers for Castlevania also. Just watch that show. It's pretty good too. I haven't watched Nocturne yet. Maybe I will at some point. Anyways, addition to this, Universal Studios recently opened their new Epic Universe park, which includes a ride centered around the classical Universal monsters, in which Dracula, in all of his pale and fanged glory, makes an appearance. If I can scrounge up the funds to go to this park, I would love to and film a video, particularly the monster section, for the YouTube channel. Now, the point is that we might be seeing a new trend in vampire media being produced by Hollywood. From that one Renfield movie with Nicolas Cage, to Morbius, to Last Voyage of the Demeter, from Salem's Lot to Nosferatu to Sinner. Okay, maybe this trend isn't as new as I thought it was. But, regardless, it looks like we're getting another, almost a renaissance of vampire films. And I personally look forward to seeing it as a huge fan of vampires. I love my Dracula, I love Nosferatu, I love JoJo. I think you already know which kind of vampires I don't like based on the rant I just went on. But I like the scary vampires. I like my vampires scary and nasty. And possibly coming with deep themes of humanity and transhumanism and... yeah. I promise I'm not pretentious, guys. I'm just really bad at math, and I just want something I can intellectually interact with in a substantial way. So with that, if you guys have any stories or anything you'd like to share, please feel free to email jruckman27@mywhitworth.edu or shoot me a DM on Instagram. Thank you all for tuning in to listen. Next week won't be an episode. but I will post a vlog on Friday where I start looking at things for the cryptid hunting trip. I hope you guys have a good night, and join us next time when we take a look at what else is out there.